So let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
I think the president is going to encourage everyone this morning to get in line and get the votes done. We need to deliver this for the American people. The American First agenda is all wrapped up into one big bill, and we're really excited to deliver it this morning.
Let's see. They have a long way to go in order to do it, but the big, beautiful bill countdown, Trump storms into the Capitol Hill to talk with his House members, and he's going to try to push the blue states with Republican people and the red states and come together when it comes to Medicaid and when it comes to SALT.
Number 2.
You said last week that you thought nothing was going to happen, no advances would be made until you and Putin got together. Do you still feel that way?
I think something's going to happen. Big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved, but I think something's going to happen.
Well, let's see. Can't quit, Mr. President. That's what J.D. Vance is talking about on Monday. If these guys don't come together, we're out. It's not our war. I think it is. Putin and Trump talk. Little accomplished, biggest worry. We throw in the towel. I say we slap them hard with sanctions.
Number 1.
We had multiple cabinet members that said if there had been a crisis, especially in 2024, late in the middle of the night, they did not have confidence that Joe Biden would necessarily be up to that task. And as a result, you sort of have the institutional aspects of the presidency that would have probably tried to take hold.
There you go. Biden declined. A flood of intel shows he was an empty vessel. But aides and secretaries still too gutless to put their names and their alarming revelations. Medical experts claim he could not have had just found out now about advanced cancer, including Ezekiel Emanuel, who came out and said there's just no way that he got this within the last 100 days, which is just more deception, even though cancer is obviously the most serious. But we've been lied to about the Russia situation. We've been lied to about the laptop situation. Both we knew. And now we get lied to about his mental health, physical health, what he was able to do, who was making the decisions, and now people that ignored it are getting to cash in on it. Alan Dershowitz joins us now, Harvard Law professor and former Harvard Law professor and author of a brand new book, The Preventive State, The Challenge of Preventing Serious Harms While Preserving Essential Liberties. Professor, welcome back.
Well, thanks. Always a pleasure to be. On with you. Thanks for having me.
So how new is this to you, or what stands out to you about all the revelations about Biden's health now?
Well, I'm not surprised. I've known Joe Biden since 1980. I worked with him on Ted Kennedy's campaign for president. I've always liked Joe. He's a really, really nice guy. I've spent time with him, but clearly he was diminished. And like many people, when you get to be about 80, I've been very lucky. I'm 86. I just finished my 57th book. So wow. Good to me. But a lot of my friends who are in their 80s begin to suffer mental declines, and it was very obvious in Trump and in the Biden case, and the chutzpah that many Democrats had when they claimed, "Oh, don't worry, Trump has the same problem. He's also diminished. Look at Trump. My God, no president in history has done more in 4 months and been more energetic in 4 months. You could agree with him, you could disagree with him, but you cannot deny the fact that he's on top of his game."
Right. Listen to, Zvika Emanuel. Obviously, his brother's Rahm Emanuel. He's a Democrat. He worked on the transition campaign and worked on the pandemic for President Biden. This is what he said yesterday. Cut 14.
But it is also aggressive. When we talk about aggressive, part of what we mean is that Gleason score. That score is from it's 2 up to 10. And he's at a 9. And that means that the cancer doesn't look normal. It looks very abnormal, which is probably why it's in the bone. And it's been around for a very long time in President Biden years. Exactly how many we don't know, obviously. And it is a little surprising to many of us oncologists that he wasn't diagnosed earlier.
And the question is, was he? With that track record I just explained to you, does anyone trust something like this? I mean, we should know it. Go ahead.
It's interesting because, I have this new book called The Preventive State, and it deals mostly with crime and terrorism, but also deals with medicine. It also deals with how we are moving much more toward prevention rather than only cure. And the idea that he had this rampant cancer for a long time while he was president. I mean, I get a PSA test every, 6 months, every year, something like that. It picks up things like prostate cancer. So, I mean, there are only two alternatives, as I think the former Surgeon General said, either malpractice on the part of his doctors or they knew about it and they covered it up for political reasons. I can't think of a third alternative at this point.
So let's talk about the preventative state. What do you mean in writing this book? You said the preventative state, the challenge of preventing serious harms while preserving essential liberties. So does the ends justify the means? If you have the right objective to inoculate a whole country to keep us safe, can you lie to us about it? Can you mandate things like that while sacrificing liberty?
Well, the end sometimes justifies some means. If we could have prevented 9/11, or if Israel could have prevented October 7th by arresting a few people, even making some mistakes, that would be a trade-off that's worth it. If we could prevent the spread of COVID and a few people taking the inoculation suffer consequences, maybe that trade-off is worth it. But as Benjamin Franklin said, those who would give up essential liberty to obtain a little bit of security deserve neither. So the thesis of my book is that you have to always have trade-offs, but the trade-offs have to be worth it. You have to know that by doing something, you're going to stop something worse. To give you two examples. Number one, we're facing it now. Should we bomb Iran's nuclear facilities? If we don't, the end result could be millions of deaths if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. But if we do, the result may be unnecessary deaths. Britain and France faced the same problem in a larger form even in 1935, when they could have destroyed the German army before they killed 50 million people in the Second World War. They failed to do that. That was a terrible false negative, a terrible mistake. They thought something wouldn't happen, and it did happen. So we have all kinds of mistakes both ways, and this new book, The Preventive State, is designed to create a framework, a jurisprudence for how we make predictive decisions. Take, for example, deportation. We are deporting people in order to prevent them from committing horrible crimes. But sometimes we deport the wrong people, or we deport them too quickly. How many mistakes in deportation are we prepared to make in order to prevent how many crimes? And I think the Supreme Court is basically sending a message saying, President Trump, you have the right to decide who stays in this country, but you have to dot every constitutional I and cross every constitutional T. You have to make sure that you give them some semblance of due process. So the deportation issue, the Iran issue, the COVID issue, these are all instances of the preventive state in operation. And that's why at age 86, I've written what I call my magnum opus. I've written 57 books, and this is the most important one because it talks about how we deal with our future, because we are moving more toward prevention and away from just reaction, and we have to do it in the right way.
Right. So let's go with the Aliens Enemies Act, which the Supreme Court said does not apply here. It's not invasion. So that kind of was a setback because the president wants to be able to say, hey, illegal immigrant committed a crime. Here's your jumpsuit. This is your plane ticket. You're gone. Yeah. We're dumping you somewhere, whether it's Sudan or El Salvador. And now the Supreme Court says, no, you got to have your day in court. Can I ask you, does it have to be can it be a semblance of that? For example, can it be a hearing without a lawyer? Can it just be a moment where you have it in front of a judge? Can it be a pseudo judge?
Yeah, and it could be by Zoom. It doesn't have to be in person. You can deport people based on probable cause and then give them the right to go to an American embassy and seek due process by Zoom. Remember, due process only means the process that's due to you based on your status and what you're accused of. And the legislature can solve this. They could amend the act, and they could say that it doesn't require an invasion. All it requires is danger from illegal immigrants. And then you get the power. Congress has been sitting on its hands. Congress could solve a lot of these problems. It could solve the problem of birthright citizenship. It could say that if a person is born to illegal aliens in the United States and stays there only 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months, that person is not, quote, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, therefore, under the Constitution, not subject to getting citizenship. So Congress could do a great deal to alleviate this problem. Right now, we have only 2 branches of the government operating. We have the Supreme Court and the judiciary counteracting the executive, but the legislature is sitting on its hands. And I think the legislature could be doing a lot more to ease the president's burden in trying to achieve these preventive results. That's what deportation is. It's designed to prevent illegal aliens who are criminals, gang members, from harming Americans. And, we have to have the power to prevent. We have to have the power to prevent 9/11. Israel has to have the power to prevent October 7th. and it's much better to prevent than to react. So if we can do it preventively, imagine how much easier it would have been if Israel had been able to prevent October 7th, or if we had been able to prevent the events that occurred, Pearl Harbor, any of those things. But to do it, we have to make predictive and preventive decisions. And in my book, The Preventive State, I try to create a framework for how we make those decisions.
Well, let's look at Israel if we can. Looks like Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, yesterday said, we're going to be in control of Gaza. And by the way, everyone out of Khan Yunis, because we're going in there next. That upsets our European friends. And they said that they quickly got to get aid to Gaza. We're getting aid. We have urged them to get aid to some of the Palestinians. Your reaction to where at this point, 2.5 years later, where it looks like the Israelis have to take this back because Hamas is not giving up.
Absolutely. And what they did the other day, killing Mohammed Sinwar, along with a dozen or so of his commanders, was a perfect example of preventive action. They saved many lives by doing that, and they did it proportionally. And yet France and England and Canada are saying, oh, we're going to impose sanctions on Israel. They were much worse when it came to Iraq. Many mistakes in Iraq, many more people killed, and yet they blame Israel for responding to what was a genocidal attempt on its population. 1,200 innocent people killed, 250 captured. Israel's been acting absolutely properly and proportionally, and I hope that they do get rid of Hamas in Gaza. Gaza was returned to the Palestinians 2005. It could have been Singapore in the Mediterranean. Could have been the most beautiful area. I've been to Gaza. I've eaten in Khan Yunis. It's a beautiful city with great food, but the Hamas has taken it over and turned it into a hell. And it's all their fault. And if you can restore Gaza to a situation where Hamas has no control over it, maybe you can get some peaceful resolution between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. But with Hamas in charge, there's no possibility of peace.
Do you want to see Israel take action against Iran, even if we are not, we don't have a role?
What I want to see is Trump give an absolute warning, say within 30 days, if Iran doesn't dismantle all of its nuclear programs, enrichment of centrifuges, there will be an attack. I would hope Iran would back away and there wouldn't have to be an attack. But if there has to be an attack, let Israel do it. Let the United States provide them bunker-busting bombs and B-52s. Israel will never ask for boots on the ground from Americans. What they would like, of course, is technological help maybe in repelling rockets. But Israel can do it on its own, and it will save the world and the Gulf enormous amount of grief if Iran does not develop a nuclear bomb. That's a perfect example of prevention, how the preventive state could stop a cataclysmic event of Iran developing nuclear weapons.
How do you see the conflict with the Trump administration and Harvard playing out ultimately?
Well, I have a new book coming out called Trump to Harvard, Go Fund Yourself. And I think that Trump has been doing the right thing, putting pressure on anti-Semitic schools and making it clear that they would have done the same thing in the 1950s if the Klans were trying to prevent black students from going to school in the 1950s. And what the left, the hard left, and the anti-Israel radicals are doing to Jewish students at Columbia, at Penn, at Harvard, at other places is unacceptable under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and the administration has the right to do something about it. Now, they shouldn't be cutting back funding on cancer research and on other scientific research, but they should be cutting back funding on the politicization of much of universities. If you today try to take a course in a university in political science or sociology, you're going to get propaganda for the most part. You're not going to get teaching. Are the professors, I taught at Harvard 50 years, aren't teaching their students how to think. They're teaching them what to think. They're propagandizing them. And universities have an important role to play. And the federal government has an important role to play to make sure that universities comply with the law.
Let's see if they understand that Trump is not going to give up and they're going to have to come. They can get all the lawyers they want, but they're going to go to the mat for this. I don't think you have obligated to give people grant money. Right. Alan Dershowitz, congratulations on your latest book, The Preventive State, The Challenge of Preventing Serious Harms While Preserving Essential Liberties. Thanks so much, Professor.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Dave Ignatius joins us now. Dave, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
Hey, David, first off, what level are you surprised by how checked out Joe Biden was for the last 4 years?
Well, I wrote a column that got him really angry back in September 2023, saying he shouldn't run. Yeah, the White House, cut me off, was really upset that I was saying what everybody, I think, could see on their TV screens, which was that running for another 4-year term just wasn't appropriate. So, I've been expressing this for a while. It's not a recent view. I must say, when anybody gets a serious cancer the way he has, and after a lifetime of trying to serve his country, I'm not in a mood to criticize him. But we all saw what we saw, and I think just a real tragedy that Joe Biden didn't see the time to step back and come.
The question was he ever there? I mean, you have people, cabinet secretaries, saying that he could not take a cabinet meeting without getting the questions ahead of time, and the answers were written on cards. This is by his cabinet secretaries. This is early on his administration. I mean, if there isn't a reason to pick a 25th Amendment, I don't know what is.
I've heard different versions, Brian. I have to be honest. The people I've talked to, and it's a range of people, intelligence, military people who were in the Situation Room with him, described somebody who, however old and feeble he looked, still, had a good active intelligence, asked the right questions. We'll never know because we weren't in that room. I think there is a time when the people around you need to say, David, Brian, Joe, it's time to pack it in, and that didn't happen here, and it's really a tragedy.
So let's talk about foreign policy and where we're at right now. What do you think came out of the president's call? What is your read on the president's 2.5-hour call of Vladimir Putin?
Say, Brian, I just was in Ukraine 10 days ago. I admire the people fighting there. I should say that at the outset. What's happened is that Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader, has refused to make any concessions. President Biden asked him very specifically, I want a ceasefire before negotiations begin. And Putin stiffed him. He said, nope, not going to do it. So President Trump's response, unfortunately, is to say, okay, when you and the Ukrainians talk and you try to figure out if you can get to a ceasefire. In other words, he basically accepted Putin's demand without pushback. And I'm sorry to see that, to be honest.
I just hope that's not the final push, because I know they're talking sanctions. Now, what's working through the Senate that will just trump that, pun intended? They have over 70 votes in the Senate to sanction their central bank, correct? And sanction third-party sanctions on anyone who buys their energy.
So Lindsey Graham, friend of President Trump, sometimes people speak of him as a Trump whisperer because he can get to President Trump, has lined up these 70 co-sponsors for a bill that will say to Putin, you play ball here, you get in the negotiations for real, or you're going to get a significant penalty from the United States in terms of the sanctions, a range of things. And I think that's great. I think that's the way, a superpower, which the United States is, needs to negotiate. If people ignore, if Putin ignores the request of the President of the United States, he needs to pay a price. Simple as that.
So what did you see on the ground in Ukraine?
What I saw was a much heavier bombardment. They're firing ballistic missiles at Kyiv, which they don't often do, waves and waves of drones. But compared to the last time I was there, Brian, about 6 months ago, I saw a much stiffer determination of people. It's like the worst has happened, and they're still there.
Amazing.
They're still fighting. The Europeans have stepped up for them in a significant way and said, we have your back, even if the United States pulls out. And so they feel a little more confidence, I think.
So, I mean, the demands that Russia has is just flat out ridiculous. I mean, they're incomprehensible that Ukraine won't have an army, that they basically have to give up land they haven't even gotten yet in the Donbass area. They have to have immediate elections. I mean, Vladimir Putin's demands, it makes you wonder, do they understand that they're losing 5,000 a week? Do they understand that inflation is at 10% there, interest rates at 20%. They understand that President Trump is saying economically, I'll give you a lifeline. Just stop the fighting. What do they want out of this? Like, why do the Russians think it's their advantage to fight this?
Well, Putin attached his presidency, his prestige to this. He's obsessed with Ukraine. He doesn't believe that Ukraine's a real country. And now, 3 years later, the Russians have suffered almost 800,000 dead and wounded. Imagine that. It's more people than they've lost in all the wars since 1945 combined. 800,000 people. Telling them Ukraine is a real country. We're fighting back every day. Russia, in 3 years, hasn't taken Donetsk province, let alone Ukraine. So, Putin got more than he bargained for. And I hate to say this, but I think he's counting on Donald Trump to bail him out from a catastrophic mistake. He's been waiting for Trump, hoping Trump will rescue him. And I admire President Trump for saying this war needs to end. He's absolutely right. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. But it needs to end on terms that just doesn't blow right back, stable terms that provide a ceasefire line that can be monitored and a just settlement that all sides can live with. So I'm just hoping that the president and the White House can find a way to do what they promise, which is negotiate a real end to this war that lasts. But if they just give in to Putin, we're going to have more fighting and more death.
Well, I don't think so. I think if anything, he's just going to say walk away, but he's got to do it with offering sanctions. Like if you walk away, you're not going to get the same deal. We are going to sanction your central bank. We are going to continue to give weapons to Ukraine, especially defense weapons. They want to pay for them. They ask for Patriots. They say we will pay for them. So give it to them. They're defensive weapons. I don't understand the problem. But let's talk about what they are doing. They're making our Western allies step up. So Trump won. They just want to say he was a Neanderthal. He doesn't understand anything, and he's going to be gone anyway. Well, he did his 4 years. He won some people over, including the head of NATO, the general secretary, who said we finally have people spending close to 2%. And now he's saying let's up it to 5%. And the new German leader said we got to learn to act alone. Say, David, it's much different than the foreign policy we're used to for 50 years. But I kind of like the fact that the Western countries got to start putting money into their own defense. We'd love to not spend $1 trillion a year. We don't have that luxury. Why should they?
So I think that's a real benefit. I think Europe has discovered that it can't be a free rider around the United States anymore. And, the hard side of that is they can't rely on the United States anymore in the same way that they did. So they're going to do it themselves. They're going to step up, as they should. So as you say, Germany's spending 5% of its GDP for defense, unheard of. The new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, just said that Germany is going to have the strongest army in continental Europe. That's amazing. I mean, Germany has been running the other way from any kind of military power since 1945. We know why, but it is time now for them to take a stronger role. You've got Poland, which is a strong country militarily. The new members of NATO, Sweden and Finland, those are really strong, advanced countries. They're willing to put the money into defense. So, as the U.S. steps back, the Europeans, thank goodness, are stepping forward. I just don't want Ukraine to get crushed in the middle of that transition. I think that would be a tragedy. I don't know if people listen to you. I hope they hear your arguments, Brian, because I make this argument. I'm not sure anybody's listening to me, but I hope you continue to make it.
Dave Ignatius, I guess everyone listens to you. So, David, I want to also take a look at what's happening with the Iranian deal. So it seems that they are on the same page now, the administration saying zero enrichment, not going to happen. But to me, you got to get rid of the infrastructure, too. And they were talking about a consortium with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. I don't know if that's been confirmed with the foreign minister last week. Where do you think, and what do your contacts say they're at with this Iranian talks? Are they stringing us out?
So I think to some extent we're being played. I think the best we're likely to end up with is a version of the deal that Trump walked away from in 2018. But I think that has its benefits. I always thought it was worth keeping, as did our chiefs of staff and our intelligence leadership, because it did monitor, verify Iranian compliance with the caps. If there's no enrichment, if the Iranians aren't able to move quickly to weapons-grade uranium, then you have more lead time, more ability to see a real breakout when it's coming. Israel will be more secure. We will too. So I think that's a deal that we could live with. The danger is that the whole Gulf now is perched on, it's on the edge of becoming nuclear. So whatever Iran gets, Saudi Arabia is going to demand, the UAE is going to demand. So you're going to have a much more unstable region potentially. And it's a reason to make sure that we don't give in too much to Iranian demands, because they'll be matched. You'll have nuclear powers surrounding the Gulf, and that's a real tinderbox. So we don't want that. I hope Steve Witkoff negotiates this well. It's very technical stuff. Hope he gets some good experts to go in with him so he doesn't get taken for a ride by the Iranians.
David, a couple of things.
Anytime we have less war in the Middle East, I'm for it.
Well, I've never seen the Gulf. I mean, it's so obvious what the problem is now. I mean, if people say, well, there's Israel's a problem or the Palestinians is a problem, Iran is the problem. Financing Hamas, financing Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, causing the unrest, propping up Assad. So the Russians distraction Ukraine allowed Assad to be vulnerable. They've now lost a friendly outlet there. Hopefully they'll lose their base. Now the Iranians no longer have any access. They're hated by this new Syrian government as long as it lasts. The Gulf states are pretty much understand that Iran is the problem. They are financing Hamas and Hezbollah. They're the ones October 7th. Without Iran, that doesn't happen. So with their missile defense down, with Hezbollah and Hamas severely diminished, this is the opportunity to take out that program. Robert Gates says this is the one problem with doing it, Cut 32.
Yeah.
The problem that I've had with a strike on the Iranian nuclear program is that it buys you a year or two. You're not going to be able to destroy, short of, as long as you're using conventional weapons, you cannot get at the very deeply buried parts of the Iranian nuclear program.
He said that's the challenge, a year or two. What do you think?
So you're gaining a year or two at the risk of a lot of just instability, a chain of action and reaction you can't predict. So the Israelis argued strongly in February, now's the time to go. Now's the time for a military strike. Iran has never been weaker. Let's do it. And President Trump, I think, felt jammed. He didn't want to start a war with Iran. His conclusion he couldn't predict, so he decided not to. He ended up siding with Bob Gates in that same clip. We're not getting enough for the risks we're taking. So that led to some distance between him and Prime Minister Netanyahu. But your basic question, if not now, when? If this is the time to get the limits on Iran's program, militarily or diplomatically, it won't come again. Make sure you use this opportunity. That's actually absolutely right, and I hope Witkoff understands. This is the time you got to get the absolute binding deal, or if you don't, you're going to have to think about other military options.
I think you're right, and I think also they're so unpopular with the Iranian people that not many people, there will not be tears shed if that government's decapitated. But I know it's easier said than done. David, thanks so much. Look forward to these very interesting times, and I think you're kind of open to someone shaking up our foreign policy. So it's and I've been reading what you've been writing about it. So let's see what happens, as Trump likes to say. Appreciate it, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, Zvika Klein is here. He's the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. He has an article out right now, The Missing Face in Israel's War. Where is the IDF spokesperson? And Zvika's here in New York putting together a heck of a conference. You were kind enough to have me on, and you interviewed me yesterday.
Yeah.
You're looking ready to go. You're looking for another 12 hours on stage. What do you think?
No. It was. I'm on fumes at the moment. It was great. It was great to have you, and it was fun to ask you questions.
Right, for a change,
and not the opposite. But it was good. It was a mix of political figures from the United States, from Israel, social media influencers from both countries, etc., business people. So it really was a mix of the relations between these two countries, the Jewish community.
And what right now is the sense in Israel about about Donald Trump now that he's taken office?
Right.
I get the term unpredictable is making your job challenging.
And yours too.
Right.
Exactly.
Always.
So it's interesting. So we keep on seeing reports about the fact, all these, reports of sources from, within the White House, close to the White House, around the White House, saying that Donald Trump is either tired of waiting for Netanyahu to make a move, or is concerned about, which, by the way, I'm sure he is concerned, right, about what's happening in Gaza. And I think even maybe, I think Adam Bowler yesterday said, it's not, none of us want to see children being killed in Gaza. That's not something we want to see. At the same time, people are a bit frustrated from expecting some sort of magic to happen last week when he was in the Middle East, President Trump. I think, but those who are in the administration have all.
When you mean magic, a visit to Israel, to end with a visit to Israel.
Not even necessarily a visit, but like an announcement, because there's a lot of Israelis who are just fed up in general, whether with Netanyahu, whether with the war. People have been in reserve, hostages, but like being in also people like the average Israeli's been in reserves for. I don't know. I have a reporter, he's in Gaza now for the third time in reserves. He's an adult. He's not in. It's not his job. But it's a big issue. So people are looking up to him, to President Trump, and expecting, in a sense, it's weird, like him to be able to either to break a deal, to force Netanyahu to do something. I don't know. It's an interesting situation. But the officials that we hear from are all saying there's no night and day between the United States and Israel. And Adam Bowler said yesterday that the IDF operation in Gaza at the moment actually helped release the hostage Idan Alexander last week from Hamas captivity, which is an American move with Hamas, nothing to do with Israel or necessarily the mediators. So it's
here's Adam Bowler from yesterday. Cut 60.
The way I think about President Trump, both in 45, in between, during President Biden and now, is I don't think the support's ever wavered. He happens to be a very consistent person. He likes when there's consistency on the other side, and I don't think there's ever been a change in support for Israel, Israeli state, the Jewish people broadly. You see everything we're doing, anti-Semitism.
So he says no wavering. Bowler's very tight with the president. He had a lot to do with the Abraham Accords.
Right. And he knows the Middle East, right? He's not like, he wasn't parachuted in from nowhere.
What do you mean, like Steve Witkoff?
Right, exactly. But he's got other qualities, Steve Witkoff, right? But, so Adam Bowler knows the region, comes from this background, et cetera. So it's a big question whether, and you know what? Also, even though Trump, as you said, unexpected or whatever, but sometimes things take a few days, right? Like there can potentially be, hopefully, things happening behind the scenes that are actually moving forward to something that we're not aware of. But, there's so many contradicting reports from sources, quote unquote.
Oh, here's more from Bowler yesterday on what it meant when President Trump didn't go from a Gulf state to a Gulf state to a Gulf state to Israel. Cut 59.
Every foreign visit obviously is not a referendum on a particular country one way or the other. Trump obviously has engaged with Bibi. It was his first visit.
Right.
I think Bibi's been 3 times.
Twice, I think.
There may have been a quick return back on the tariff side, but maybe it's 2. But a lot of interaction, and certainly during those visits, a good portion of those visits was discussing the hostage situation broadly, as well as the perspective of joining the Abraham Accords. And so I think Israel was close at mind in those, independent of whether there was another stop, et cetera.
Your thoughts? How was it perceived in Jerusalem?
Yes, I think people were reassured by what Adam Bowler had to say. Interestingly, I think Adam Bowler also, up until, I would say, 2 weeks ago, was pretty much a controversial figure. Because he was mediating directly with Hamas.
Which we'd never have done before.
Right. Though I don't know enough, maybe you know this more, like that position of the hostage envoy or whatever it's called, basically it's American citizens, right? That's his jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So supposedly, that's really the only official that's theoretically allowed.
Right. I mean, he goes from Afghanistan to Russia.
So you have to, as he said yesterday, like, I have to speak to the bad guys. Like, that's my job, right? And I think the fact that he was really there with Dan Alexander, American-Israeli citizen, being released together with Steve Witkoff, kind of showed that, that he's not a bad guy.
Right.
And I think he comes from the Jewish community. So I think it was really important for him to kind of show the complexity. And we're in an era where it's very difficult to portray complexity.
So right now, I guess the president made clear, he says, I'm tired of seeing starving babies. We can't do that. So in comes the aid. They're going to find a way to do it. And you got to create the roads to do it. He also said, out of Khan Yunis, to all the citizens, I'm going in again. So they're going to clear and hold. The Israelis you guys are going to clear and hold. How close do you think is this operation to being done, where there's so few Hamas left? Because you just killed another leader, Mohammed Sinwar.
Right.
With few left, that you could say they're no longer a threat.
This operation, from what I'm hearing from people from within the IDF, is, I'm going to try and choose my words carefully, there's no real end game. Like, the units that are, going in have very specific objectives to go through certain areas, but like, there's no real understanding of what the end game.
I know it's difficult, but why is it?
Also within this government, basically, there's a big chunk of parties and members that are not willing to stop fighting, and they think that the best way to cause Hamas to pick up that white flag and surrender is by force. Others are on the fence. I feel like as time goes by, people are softening up a little bit, but then Netanyahu would have that internal issue. But I think he could also overcome it with a lot of, centrist parties within the Knesset that have been saying for a very long time, we will support the government from the outside, or even join us, a temporary, unity government, in order to get some sort of a deal that ends the war, has all the hostages returned.
Right. Eli Lake, who you know, right? He's with the Free Press now. He said that you have Israel has a big decision coming on Iran. Cut 30.
So the Iranians are posturing right now, and what they're counting on is, I think, to string out the negotiations and try to rebuild their air defenses in the process and try to get into a better strategic situation. And I think they're counting on a kind of over-the-top paranoid hysteria from some voices in the U.S. on both the left and the right that are going to say anything you do militarily against Iran is the start of World War III. So in my view, that is a ploy, because you want the Iranians to think, all right, if you don't make a deal soon, bombs away. That's what you want the Iranians to think. And I think Israel is going to have to make a choice in a couple months. If Trump, doesn't commit, they might have to do it themselves. And I do think they have more capabilities than we than sometimes let on in the public discourse.
What do you think about that scenario? And does Israel have more capabilities than one would think?
Yes.
Intelligence-wise, for sure.
There are more capabilities, but not only intelligence. I mean, we've seen operations that the Mossad has taken out, whether acknowledged it or not, in Iran, that have been precise, exact, like an artwork of espionage. That said, I think I've spoken to many military experts that said, in order to do what needs to be done with the nuclear facilities, Israel cannot do it without the United States militarily. I don't know enough about that, but those who I've spoken to who are, that's their turf, definitely believe that Israel cannot do that final push attack without the United States with it. And it's a big question, right? Like, what will Israel do if Trump actually does move forward there? And it's a question: will this be very similar to the Obama administration agreement back in the day, which was terrible, right?
Which allowed them to fund the proxies and use ballistic missiles, and and it just sunsets in 10 years.
Right. So I mean, I don't see Republicans supporting that.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't
right.
get. It wouldn't get 40 votes.
Right.
Because remember, Chuck Schumer didn't vote for that. Ben Cardin didn't vote
Right.
for that. Senator Menendez didn't vote for that. So he never even put it up for Senate verification. Therefore, Trump came in and ripped it up with no. He didn't have a treaty to unwind.
Right.
There was none. It was paper.
Right. So it's a very. I think just like the Middle East is really kind of like a boiling pot at the moment,
But I do think it's less. It is such an opportunity. It's so obvious that Iran's a problem.
Yeah.
It is so more obvious than ever Iran's a
Right.
problem.
The question is how we get all these moderate countries and forces together-ish on board, right? I mean, we had Trump, who's just like, I think it was amazing how he's like El Jelani,
The head of Syria.
The head of Syria. I don't know if we call him the president or not, but yeah,
I guess
the leader.
leader.
You should normalize relations with Israel. And he's like, yeah, when we stabilize, we will. Like,
it's crazy.
It's amazing, though. It's amazing.
In a good way.
Yeah. Are they good people? Not necessarily, but you don't only have diplomatic ties with good people. You have to have, right?
You just want to know there's not going to be terror being coming at your border.
Right, at your border, and that's a big deal.
And they look at Iran as the problem, too.
Right. And Lebanon as well, right? They have Hezbollah, which is an Iran proxy, but Lebanon itself, theoretically, those who are not part of Hezbollah are not in that mindset.
And if Iran was to go away or change governments, and those, like Syria did, Syria without Assad is no longer an ally to Iran. If Iran, I know it's harder than it seems, but if this very unpopular government was decapitated and they were able to put somebody else in place,
right,
there would be a fresh start.
Right.
I mean, how could it be worse?
Right. In Saudi Arabia is really also a big question. I mean, you were just mentioning yesterday how these documents that were showing. I mean, there was conspiracy theories before, but now there's actually documentation saying that the main part of the October 7th attack on Israel 2023 was because Israel was about to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. And I even know, back in the day, Jack Lew, who came to be an ambassador in Israel for Biden in the middle of the term, and he said to me, black on white, he said, my objective is to close the deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That was my only mission. It wasn't to strengthen ties between Israel and the U.S. It was to do that.
Right.
And October 7th made it not happen.
Well, I would say also it didn't help that President Biden's policy said, Houthis, you're no longer on the terror watch list. You're a pariah nation, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
That wasn't helpful to your cause.
Right.
I mean, you're probably third on the list of people that it hurt, but fundamentally it wasn't good to America's interests, as imperfect as Saudi Arabia is.
Right.
Because they're the counter to Iran.
Yeah, but I think we find out as time goes on how much cover-up there was about his situation, Biden. And, we all know Biden is a true supporter of Israel. But what was he aware of? You know what I'm saying? Like, what did he know? And I really feel like he was in a situation that people were just feeding him certain information, and decisions were being made by other people.
And before we let you go, your thought: what should the people know about the attitude of the people in Israel right now, as opposed to last year, even 6 months ago? What is the mindset? Because in the north, the threat has been diminished. The Hamas threat has been diminished. The Houthi threat is
not
real.
Totally diminished, but like
okay,
yeah. But
so your thoughts are like walking around Israel today. Do you feel better than 6 months ago?
People are tired. People people want normal lives. They want the hostages to return, and especially those who have been released. The hostages who have been released feel like they have this like psychological contradiction in themselves of being happy and eating and whatever, but also like they're guilty. Yeah, like they can't. And as I mentioned, people who have been in reserve duty for so long. Yes, we are strong. Yes, we are resilient. But people are
right.
So I mean, I want to be positive. I want to think that it will be good. But we're not in the same place we were a year ago.
I hear you. Better. I think you're better.
I mean,
it's harder, but
yeah. I'm saying when it comes to spirit, when it comes to
Hopefully the 23 are out. There's even something. Adam Bowler was even said something might be on the table. I think 10 for 2 months of a ceasefire. I think you could do better than that. Hopefully they're all out. Or you just walk in and they're allowed out. Zvika, Klein, the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Great to see you. Thanks so much for coming.
Brian.
Back in a moment.
What happens if they were to go and arrest these members, or if they would try to sanction them here in the House of Representatives?
They'll find out. It's a red line. It's very clear. First of all, I think that the so-called Homeland Security spokesperson is a joke. It's been made loudly and abundantly clear to the Trump administration. We're not going to be intimidated by their tactics. He's the most unpopular president in American history after his first 100 days. Give me a break. No one's intimidated by this dude. No one. And so there are clear lines that they just dare not cross.
So that was Keem Jeffries, obviously, who says a word every 5 minutes. They actually charged that congresswoman because you have to see the video. She stampedes through the fence, and evidently Alexis McAdams was told behind the scenes when she gets beyond the fence, they tried to handcuff the mayor who wouldn't move. So as they go to do it, she jumped in between the ICE agent and the mayor, at which time, instead of creating an additional scene, they pushed everybody out, and then they cuffed the mayor in front of everyone. And they said, well, why are you making a scene of cuffing the mayor? Because this congresswoman wouldn't get out of the way. And this woman thinks she can bulldoze. You have to see her. She's like a running back, not even a running back. Running backs try to avoid tackles. She's running through people, trying to get up the middle because she thinks there's children being harmed inside an ICE facility. What does she actually think about our law enforcement, to think that children need her help outside Newark? Or is she just somebody that got all amped up, think that this is going to help her career, thought that she could bully ICE agents because for some reason they're not popular with the American people, and thought she could just go do that? So her name is Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, and there's going to be a hearing today on the examining of threats to ICE operations. This will be front and center. If you're in ICE, you're dangerous. You're pulling out criminals that are here illegally. My goodness, they got nothing to lose in many cases. So they're accusing her of McIver of assault, impeded and interfere with law enforcement in violation of Title 18 of the U.S. Code. Alina Habba makes the charge. Tom Homan, when you see that video with everything you got on your plate, what were your thoughts when you heard this was going down and you saw this video?
That she should be arrested. I mean, I said from day one, you and I have talked many times since day one in the administration, I said, you cannot support ICE. Shame on you, but, you have that right. You can protest. That's fine. You can stand by and support sanctuary cities, but you can't cross the line. You can't cross the line of impediment. You cannot cross the line of knowingly harboring, concealing illegal aliens. And you certainly can't cross the line but put hands on an ICE officer. So I wasn't bluffing. I meant it. They crossed the line. So I don't care what Hakeem Jeffries said. I put my red line out there first. So we crossed this red line, so game on. Bring it. We are enforcing the law without apology.
So with the mayor, according to our reporter, investigators told our reporter that McIver blocked police from putting handcuffs on the mayor while the group was inside the ICE facility. That is why the agents were forced to wait and handcuff the mayor when he was back outside of the gates that day. I mean, that's a tough decision for law enforcement to make. They could knock her out of the way and put cuffs on, but you have to worry about escalation, correct? And you have to also say, well, this is a U.S. Congresswoman.
Yeah, you always got to be, careful of the actions you take. But, the ICE officers handle themselves very professionally. I mean, and think about it. You're disrespecting, shoving around ICE agents. The very same week as Police Week that we're here in Washington, D.C., honoring those who made the ultimate sacrifice. I went to a Border Patrol Memorial Service. I went to ICE Memorial Service. I went to Blue Mass up on, National Law Enforcement, the wall of names of all those fallen. The same week, we're supposed to be honoring the sacrifice of law enforcement. You got a congresswoman putting hands on somebody, trying to cause a disruption, putting politics over public safety. And if she simply would have went and followed the rules, she could have got a tour of that facility. Many people have. I mean, Rachel Campos went to that facility, and guess what? What did they find? One of the cleanest finest up-to-date facilities in the nation, far better than anything New Jersey has, a state or local facility. So this should be ashamed of themselves. But Alina Hava, God bless you, she's doing the right thing. No one's above the law. Haven't we heard that for 4 years? Well, guess what? Either is members of Congress.
So how much harder is your job now that the Supreme Court said the Alien Enemies Act won't apply?
Look, it makes it hard, and they push it back down to the district to the local circuit court. We're hoping to win it because, look, we're not making this up, Brian. We're using the laws on the books. We're using every tool in our toolbox. Alien Enemies Act was something that was written by Congress, enacted by Congress, and put in the statute. We're using it. And if anybody actually reads the Alien Enemies Act, we didn't violate any part of the act. People need to understand when they talk about due process, there's a less level due process than the Alien Enemies Act is written in legislation on purpose. So we're talking about the quick expulsion of those who are enemies of this nation. Those who are designated terrorists are enemies of this nation. So we think we follow the law. But, once again, you got judges, second-guessing what we're doing. We're not making this up. We're using laws on the books. I think we'll eventually win it. But until then, we're not going to stop arresting these alien enemies, and we have to hold them in detention. That's what we'll do while we're waiting on what can we do about deportation. But we have to put them in Title 8 deportation. We have to do expedited removals. So we're going to do everything we can to keep arresting them and keep removing them, even though Alien Enemies Act removal flights are put on hold. We're going to use every tool in the toolbox to keep removing public safety threats every day from this country.
So, Tom, for example, if you get you get a guy from MS-13, you know he's from MS-13, he's sitting there in a jumpsuit, and you got to send him back to El Salvador. Now, what is the process? Because you could still put him in, you could give him his hearing, can't you? If you want it. I mean, you can't possibly get 8 million people hearings. But can you give him expedited removal, which could be on Zoom, they were telling me? It could be anywhere.
Yeah, you can do expedited removal. You can do voluntary departure. A lot of these MS-13 members in this country already have a final order. So we can remove them to a normal Title A ICE flight. So we're going to do everything we can. One thing I can assure you, they're not going to be walking the street.
Yep.
They'll be locked up waiting for one of these processes to work themselves out. Either it's the Title 8 immigration judge, whether it's expedited removal, whether it's a voluntary departure. We're going to take them off the streets, and we're going to keep getting them out of the country. But there's 3 or 4 different ways we can do it. It's just a slower process, but if that's what we got to do, that's what we're going to do.
How did Bill Clinton expedite 350,000 in expedited removal? What were his rules? Did Congress give him something to do that with?
No, and we're doing expedited removals right now. The problem is we don't have the border. Most expedited removals are border crossers, right? We have the most secure border in the history of this nation right now. We don't have those kind of numbers. That's why I keep hearing this. I keep getting asked the question, we're removing less people than Biden. No, we're not. ICE interior arrests and removals are much higher than Biden, but they counted border removals. When you got 8.5 million people crossing the border, being released in the country, you got a lot of people to remove, but our border secure, so we don't count border removals. We don't have border removals. So we're actually doing a hell of a lot more than the Biden administration did, but there's less expedited removals. That's usually that's 90% border cases, and we simply don't have those border cases because our border is secure.
What's your reaction to the Supreme Court saying that you can get rid of the people who got special dispensation from Haiti, from Venezuela, and I believe Nicaragua?
I think it's the right thing to do. Brian, I started doing this job in 1984. I've said it 1,000 times, temporary protective status has never been temporary in this country. It's a shame. Temporary protective status, that they won't remove you to a specific country because the conditions of that country are inhumane or they're in war or whatever, but the conditions have changed. And every administration has been weak. Well, let's just give it to them. They've been here a while. They got jobs, and let's just keep them here. Even the country conditions are improved. Let's just keep them. No, that's a form of amnesty. So I'm glad that they're following the law. Temporary means temporary. Those conditions in those countries aren't as bad as they used to be. They need to go home. They entered the country illegally. They were protected from being deported because the conditions of the country were bad. The conditions those countries have improved. Time to go home.
So could Congress be helping you more? I mean, couldn't they pass some of these immigration laws to modernize them so you don't have to go back to 1794?
Yes. They could do 3 things in Congress that would solve 85% of the problem on the border. They can change the asylum rules, that your first interview for asylum, that threshold needs to be the same level as judicial review. That will stop the asylum fraud. Number 2, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act children from all over the world that enter this country illegally need to be treated just like children from Mexico. Once it's ascertained you're not a victim of trafficking, you can be immediately moved to your parents in the country you came from. Third, the Florida Settlement Agreement. When families come across, let us hold them in a family residential center long enough to see a judge. Over 90% will lose their case. We'll put them on an airplane, send them home, and the family stop coming. How do I know that? So we did that during the Obama administration, and it worked. Those three changes would solve 85% of the problem on the border. That way, the next president can't come in and undo everything we're doing right now through executive orders and destroy our border like Biden did when we took over from Trump 45. Congress can make these fixes permanent. I've been up on the Hill constantly. I hope they do it. But first of all, give me the money to continue doing what we're doing. We're doing great things. We need to finish this job. This administration may be the first administration in the history of this nation who actually have total operational control of our southern border. Let us finish this job and let ICE finish their job. They got to arrest 3 times more people every day than they're doing right now. We need money. We need beds. We need airplanes. We need agents.
Is that in the bill?
Contracts.
Is that in the big, beautiful bill?
Yes, if we get the money that's in the current bill right now, we can get this done. That's why I'm up on the Hill a lot. Pass this big, beautiful bill and watch what we do. Watch how secure this country is and watch how many criminal aliens and public safety threat and national security threats aliens ICE can remove if they have the resources to do it.
Well, if you get that money, the other thing would be, I understand they got to focus on this bill and you got to get everyone on page. I just watched Mike Lawler say he's not going to vote for it yet. So good luck with that, Mr. President. So he's a Republican from New York. So, Tom, afterwards, do you have the word of the speaker that they're going to do those 3 things or present those 3 things that you need done separately?
They're going to work on it. I'm not going to give up until we get it done. But look, it's people like Lawler. They got to remember, the American people voted overwhelmingly for President Trump on this issue, immigration, border security, removing public safety threats. He's been given a mandate, which means members of Congress have been given a mandate. I don't want to see what happened on Trump 45. The first 2 years on the Trump 45, we had the House and Senate, and they didn't do squat to support this president. He had to beg and take money for building the wall from other places. Haven't we learned our lesson? Let's secure the border. This should be a nonpartisan issue. A secure border saves lives. There's no downside unless fentanyl coming across kill America. There's no downside unless sex trafficking women and children. There's no downside unless public safety threats and national security threats entering this country. There's no downside unless people on the terrorist watch list crossing the border. And there's certainly no downside in bankrupting criminal cartels now designated terrorists. There's no downside in a secure border. Everybody, especially Republicans, should have no second guess of supporting this bill.
I hear you. Now, 2 things I have not heard much about. Fentanyl, I hear the numbers are going down, and I've not heard much about the northern border. What could you tell us?
Southern border is down operationally about 96%. Northern border is down about 88%. So we made great strides in the northern border. Problem is there's less resources, less technology up there. I've been up there. I've met with Canadian officials 3 times now. We're filling the gaps. But once again, this bill will give us more money to put more technology and more boots on the ground northern border. They're understaffed. We need money to hire more agents. This bill will help address the northern border. Yeah, it's down 88%. It needs to be down 100%. It needs to be down 96% like the southern border. We need money to do that. So this is another part of this bill why it's so important.
I know it's not really your jurisdiction, but the cartels make the fentanyl from the precursors from China. Have they felt the pressure?
Well, absolutely. Cartels, they're running scared right now. We're shutting down their business. They made record amounts of money in the last 4 years smuggling people, trafficking women and children, and moving drugs across the border. When we have the border down 96%, less people are coming. That means every agent's on the line doing his job, which means you're not sneaking them on fentanyl through like you used to. You're not sneaking women and children for sex trafficking and forced labor reasons. Cartels are hurting. We're hurting them where it hurts, in the pocketbook. But Mexico's got to step up and agree with Trump. We can take the cartels out permanently, but it's going to take the United States to do that. Mexico's failed for decades to do it. If you want the cartels to go away and be wiped off the face of the earth, it's going to take American money, American know-how. I hope Mexico agrees to that, because Mexico will be a much safer country if we do it.
Thanks to you, Tom. It'll be a much safer country. Tom Homan, back in a moment.